Hi there, this is Dr. Schull, and I just wanted to do a quick video for you all so you can get some really good information about the microbiome and how important it is to our health and recovering our health. Now, this goes from everything to issues with like obesity or your brain health concerns, heart disease, cancer risk. This is a huge piece of the health puzzle, and I really just want to take the time to get you guys familiar with it and understand how you can correct that microbiome to really start seeing huge changes in your health. All right, so first things first, what is the microbiome? Now, this term is really just a fancy term referring to the complex ecosystem of all the little microbes or little microscopic critters that live in and on us. So there's this big project that was undertaken called the Human Microbiome Project. That went from 2007 to 2016. And what they did is they measured, especially bacteria, but bacteria, viruses, parasites, archaea, fungi, yeasts, all these different types of little critters, and took a look at what types were living where in the body, like what's growing in your armpit, what's growing in your groin. But the most interesting and most relevant to human health has a lot to do with what's growing inside of your gut. Okay, so they found about 100 trillion organisms across the entire body. And there's a few ways you can look at that, which makes it really interesting. So, from one aspect, the number of these microbial organisms actually outnumber the number of human cells in the body at a ratio of 5 to 1. And when you think of it like this, we kind of bring up this question, are we more like 83, 90% microbes? Are we much more microbe than we are human? Reasonable question. Another way to look at that is by weight. So the microbes themselves, if we were to total their mass in the human body, it's somewhere around 3 to 5 pounds, which, that doesn't seem like nearly as much when you think of it that way. But just to put it in perspective, the human brain weighs approximately the same, and that is a pretty darn important organ. So just because it doesn't weigh a whole lot doesn't tell us that it's not going to make a huge difference or is not a really important organ, if you will, in your physiology. Okay, another way to look at that is through the genetics of these microbes. And this gets really interesting because in our human genome, our genes from human to human are about 99.9% identical between each human. Right? Yeah, we all have a lot of differences, and we ascribe a lot of this to our genetics, but those differences in our genetics are really just a small, small fraction of all the genes that we have within us in every cell of our body. Now, when we take into account the amount of genes that microbes bring to the table, they bring such a huge diversity of genetics that it outnumbers our human genome at a ratio of about 150 to 1. Right? There's 150 times more genes in our body from microbes than there are human genetics. What's really interesting about that is these microbes will actually exchange genetic material with our own human cells. And so we're getting a really interesting understanding of evolution and how microbes and humans have essentially co-evolved to be like one big symbiotic organism. Okay, now other things these microbes do for us, aside from contributing genes, they will gobble up our food that goes through our gut. And they're not just stealing it, they're actually transforming it in a lot of really positive ways. It'll help us produce vitamins like vitamin K, B12, B3, B6. It also produces a really important substance called short chain fatty acids. These are essential for controlling inflammation, regulating things in our body, uh, nourishing and healing our gut lining cells, and with a number of functions. They also, because they've got this complex ecosystem they live in, they are able to protect us from diseases that we might acquire, other unhealthy microbes bacterial or viral infections. Now, yeah, we still get those, but if we didn't have this really amazing microbiome in our gut, we would be sick all the time. I don't even know how humans would survive. And they also play another really important role because they have a lot of interaction with our immune system. Interestingly, a lot of these microbes will quiet down and shut off parts of our immune system, which keeps us from being completely inflamed and damaging ourselves constantly. So they play a really important regulation role in this capacity. And in another way, they actually also will modulate our brain, our nervous system. We call this the gut-brain axis because of this integral connection between the two. All right, so what's going on with the microbes in our gut and how they interact with our immune system does have downstream effects all the way up to the brain. And there's also the vagus nerve, which comes out of the brain and goes down and innervates our gut. And we can actually have microbes go up this vagus nerve. We can have byproducts from microbe activity go up this vagus nerve, and they have a pathway into our brain. So making sure we don't have problematic bacteria inside our gut is actually very important for preventing things from getting into our brain. And then our brain itself has a big regulation on how our gut is functioning and what microbes get in there. So there's really interesting cyclical nature between our gut function and our brain function, right? And I've found time and time again in my clinical practice with all the people I treat with brain conditions, every single time when you work on their gut function, they do see improvements in their brain function. And consequently, I often do a lot of work on people's brains and see improvements in their gut function. It's almost like the two are the same organ. They're that connected. So microbiome is pretty complex, pretty interesting, and really new science. So let me talk a little bit more about the interactions that exist between that microbiome and the rest of our health. Okay, I created this really neat looking diagram. I used to have a much more complicated one, but was able to simplify it. And I know it still looks busy, but let me just take you through it so you have a really good understanding. I think once you give it a good look, it'll be pretty self-explanatory. So you can see in the center upper part of the diagram in bright yellow is a microbiome disturbance. Now that just means that your microbiome has been thrown off. There's some degree of too little of the good types of bacteria and critters that we want growing in there that help us, and then there's too many of the microbes that are damaging us and causing inflammation and problems. So this imbalance, we can call it a microbiome disturbance. Another term for that is dysbiosis. But things are out of whack in the gut. That's primarily what we're talking about here. Now, there's a number of things that can cause that. So if you look at right above that in the white box, you'll see a number of different medications that a lot of Americans are on quite frequently. Every one of these has a strong ability to throw off those microbes and start causing problems. Right? Antibiotics are really famous for that. And that's why we have a lot of these issues around antibiotic resistance. It has to do with the microbes in our gut getting wiped out by antibiotics. Well, the antibiotics don't kill all of them. The ones that survive do develop resistance to those antibiotics. And then we start growing more antibiotic resistant versions of them. But that's a big famous one that you'll see in the media all the time. What other ones people don't talk about nearly as much is how antihistamines or antidepressants have a big impact here, particularly antacids and how they change your stomach acid. Right, your stomach acid is your first line of defense against microbes getting into your gut. If you're taking antacids and decreasing your stomach acid, guess what? You've already removed one of your basic defenses for a healthy microbiome. So a lot of medications can have an impact here. It also goes all the way back to our actual birth conditions. So if someone was born by a C-section and they did not pass through the vagina, that means they didn't get coated by all the bacteria that they are meant to be coated with that play an important role in their digestion. It's really peculiar and interesting, but the female vagina will actually switch its microbiome and start growing certain species of lactobacillus that are very specific for digesting human milk. And so the baby is supposed to come through that canal and get coated with these bacteria so its gut gets inoculated by them and it can digest and handle mom's milk. So when not born vaginally, babies often come out with the inability to digest milk. They end up getting put on formula, which is often made out of things like soy and a lot of garbage, unfortunately, but this starts training their immune systems differently, it grows different microbes, and it sets them up often for a lifetime of issues. Things like asthma, eczema, autoimmune conditions, mental health conditions, and on and on. And not just the birthing condition itself, but again, whether baby is even breastfed or not makes a difference. But there's not a lot we can do about those birth conditions, so really we need to focus on what we can change, and that has to do more with what we're taking and putting in our body, not just in terms of these medications, but also the types of foods we're eating, right? What we consume is what these microbes end up consuming. And so what we eat determines who they are and what they are. And who and what they are comes back and determines who and what we are. It's a really important relationship. Okay, so some other things that can really throw off the microbiome: stress. This is a huge one in our society. It's so rare for me to come across a patient who is just not over the top with their stress levels. Now, when we're really stressed all the time like that, our body is constantly secreting a hormone called cortisol. It helps us manage stress. And cortisol increases blood sugar, which can lead to insulin resistance, and it can lead to way down the line things like Alzheimer's disease, which is often referred to as type 3 diabetes these days. And increased blood sugar also leads to things like diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, heart disease. It's a major pathway to a lot of our chronic diseases of age. So one of the routes it does this is that cortisol, well, it does two things. One, it has the ability to break up connective tissue, which can lead to more permeability in the gut lining. Or you'll see that note in blue there, increased gut permeability. It also, when we're really stressed out, it changes how our gut functions. All right, it will alter the motility, how quickly food is moving through the gut. When we're stressed out, we decrease the amount of stomach acid we produce. With low stomach acid, again, we don't have that first line of defense, that first barrier against pathogenic microbes. But also, without enough stomach acid, our liver and gallbladder does not secrete enough bile salts. Right? Those are secreted to balance the acid and to help us absorb our fats in our food. And when that doesn't happen, all your food and all those excess microbes that pass through your stomach get into your small intestine. And now they start consuming that food and creating gas. And that gas pushes up on our stomach, pushes backwards through the intestines, and causes things like reflux. This is what actually gets people to have reflux. It's this gas pressure and backwards motion through the gut, pushing things up into the esophagus where they don't belong. It has nothing to do with excess acid. That's an old wives' tale. But people are then put on antacids, and the cycle just continues in a downward spiral. So how do we fix that? We got to take care of the stress. We got to restore the digestion and make sure we're digesting properly. We have to improve the liver health. All right, and that ties in here to environmental toxins, the orange bubble on the right. Certain environmental toxins, especially, we're inundated by this stuff all the time in our society. Industrialized culture produces so many chemicals, even from the body products we wear, makeups, not just the chemicals under the sink or our cleaning materials, things even like car exhaust, poor quality air. The list goes on and on. There's hundreds of chemicals found in every human's urine in the US. every human that's been studied, I should say. So we're inundated by this stuff, and this does impact your liver health, which comes back to impacting bile flow and how that impacts your digestion. And again, with poor digestion, we end up with a disturbed microbiome. With that disturbed microbiome, we get more gut permeability. And the key piece here is with that increase in gut permeability, we have a much greater exchange of contents in the intestine, whether that's food particles or different bacteria or other microbes. They're now able to pass into your bloodstream. And when that happens, your immune system is going to have to deal with them. Right? It sees all these other microbes that aren't supposed to be there and attacks them. It sees these foreign food particles, undigested food particles, and attacks them because it thinks they're foreign invaders. And this creates inflammation all over the body. And so guess what? That leads to a lot more brain health issues. All right, so we see decreased energy, attention and focus problems, depression, anxiety, memory issues, cognitive decline. And if this stuff persists for long enough, it becomes some of those big serious diseases like heart disease, strokes, Alzheimer's disease, dementias. So a lot of those big scaries. Inflammation is well known as a major cause to most of our chronic diseases. And this is how we get there. Now, of course, some people can have autoimmune diseases, which is going to raise their inflammation levels, but the most common way to have that high level of inflammation or chronic regular inflammation has to do with our microbiome and that interaction between our immune system and our gut function. Okay, so let me just go over to the right here. We were looking at poor liver health in the light green on the right. The other thing, other than the microbiome disturbance, is you'll also see an arrow here going down to hormonal imbalances. Now, when our liver is inundated by toxins, it's dealing with those toxins. It's not taking it's not able to put the same resources towards breaking down and managing our hormones like it's supposed to. So what we see is we can see issues around increased levels of estrogen or testosterone, or essentially our sex hormones are thrown out of balance. We also see changes in our thyroid activity and insulin activity, again, because one, the liver's not able to process things, but also we have toxins themselves that will like block insulin receptors and lead to insulin resistance. The microbiome itself actually plays a role in your thyroid activity. I couldn't put enough arrows to make every connection on this diagram, so I apologize. But there are microbes in your gut that when your thyroid hormone is processed and moves through the liver and goes into the gut, they will help you recycle it and help you reabsorb it. So you are recycling your thyroid hormone. And your thyroid and thyroid hormone plays a major role in your energy levels, in your metabolism, in your ability to think, in your mood. All right, so I hope you're starting to get the picture of how intricately linked all these pieces are and how it all exists in a really delicate balance. All right, one more piece. We're going to go over to the left side here. We talked about stress. Now, I just want to point out there's kind of a cyclical nature you'll see here. We go from stress to sleep deprivation. Right? A lot of people who are stressed out all the time have a really difficult time sleeping. And if we're sleep deprived, our brain cannot detoxify itself. It cannot get rid of the normal daily toxins or any of those environmental toxins that we've picked up. That stuff accumulates in there and causes damage and causes our brain to slowly degenerate. And as our brain is not functioning as well as it could, it impacts this whole system. Okay, now sleep deprivation can also lead to low energy and people not wanting to exercise or move their bodies so much. Or you can go either way. You see a lot of these arrows are both directions. If people aren't moving very much, they're not going to be sleeping too well, right? The human body evolved for movement and motion, and there's a lot that relies on that. And similarly, getting regular physical activity helps us manage stress. So if we're not moving our bodies, we're more stressed. Although ironically, if we're really high stress and we got too much on our plate, we're not out there exercising. So there's really an important balance we need to strike between all of these. And it's going to take a fair amount of work to get everything moving in the right direction. But the point of all of this is that a key piece in the center of all of it, if there's just one thing we start with and work to change, it's going to be working on that microbiome and that gut health. Now, just to give you an idea of all of the downstream effects of problems in the microbiome, these are all well documented through the research. There's a number of health problems that can ensue from immune reactions, from too much inflammation, right? Allergies, asthma, eczema. We can see even autoimmune reactions that start in the gut, right? There's a strong relationship between diseases like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, lupus, MS, rheumatoid arthritis. All of these conditions I very commonly can reduce and often eliminate the symptoms just by working on people's gut health and microbiome health. Right? Cardiovascular disease, dementias, things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's have really strong links to the microbiome. Diabetes, not just the type 2 that we develop with age, but even in childhood, there's a lot that we can treat with type 1 diabetes by working on the microbiome. Right? We see dysfunction in regulatory hormonal pathways like the HPA or HPT axis. Those are the hypopituitary adrenal axis, so how your brain communicates with your adrenal glands through hormones, or also how your brain communicates through to your thyroid through different hormones. And those hormonal axes are responsible for a massive amount of your health and ability to function in this world. And all of that can be influenced through the microbiome. And of course, we see gut diseases like inflammatory bowel diseases, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, IBS, celiac disease. There's actually a lot of really interesting research showing how strong changes in the gut bacteria and gut flora are the initial factor, the initial thing that triggers things like celiac disease. Now, we may need to have genetic predispositions to a lot of these disease processes, but it still turns out that those genetics are often not triggered until there's a disruption in the gut. Okay, things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Right? That's when we get lots of bacteria growing in the small intestine where we're not supposed to be having lots of bacteria, and a host of problems that causes. Even downstream effects of like vaginal infections and changes in the flora in the vagina, urinary tract infections. And we see it a lot with brain health in terms of focus and attention and depression and anxiety. Even things like headaches and migraines have a really strong link to our microbiome. And then inflammation can cause other things like muscle and joint pains throughout the body. So there's a lot that can change when we improve the health of this system. Okay, so I did a thing. I created a really cool program, which I call the Microbiome Reset. And what it is it's a really cool systematic approach to restoring balance to this entire system that really focuses on the microbiome as the core piece here. Just to give you a quick synopsis of what that looks like, it's a 2-month program. In the first month, we spend time with a specific kind of diet and specific types of supplements to help wipe out all of those problematic bacteria, yeast, fungi, parasites, etc. We also use a specific piece of that diet to determine any food sensitivities or allergies people have. Right? That way we can really make a huge impact on that inflammation piece. And we're clearing the way, we're eliminating all of the different pieces that are leading to the cycles of downward regression into poor health. And now in the second half of the program, the diet again changes, but again, it's bringing in a lot more different foods, and there is a strong focus on feeding the right types of foods to those microbes. Prebiotics play a big role in this. There's very specific probiotics that I use in this program. They're not what you might think. Probiotics are a tricky thing. Most of them pass right through you and don't do a whole lot. When we use the right kinds at the right time, we can actually make a huge, massive impact on that gut health. And so that's pretty much it. It's a 2-month protocol that really systematically brings you through how to change all of this to start bringing you into an upward spiral of health and happiness. Here's another way to look at it. This is the big picture. In this program, I teach everyone how to properly eat, what kind of diet they need to follow, how to sleep, strategies to get the best quality sleep possible. You'd be surprised how many things people are doing to completely derail their sleep quality. I talk about the best kinds of exercise to help all of this. Right, thing I forgot to mention before, your exercise impacts the microbes that live in your gut. Another little fun fact. I also talk about how to mitigate stress and manage stress, and deal with that properly. Everything from reducing the stressors in your life to what types of activities and therapies you can utilize to bring down cortisol levels and really reduce that stress response. I discuss all the supplements through the program. There's about 8 or 9 different ones that we use through the program, specifically for resetting everything and getting it back on track. And then also I discuss things around mindset and how to kind of keep sticking with it and not give up if things get difficult. How to stay motivated, which is a really important piece. Right? I don't want you to start on the program, get 2 weeks in, and then it seems hard and you want to give up. So I'm here regularly to coach you through the process and make sure you get through it with a bit of hand holding. And I even get into things like lab testing and how you can really how you can talk to your doctor and really dig down deep to make this program individualized for yourself. All right, and the big goal of all of it is really to help you create a healthier, happier version of yourself. So that's really it in a nutshell. Just keep reading down below. There's a little more details on the program, exactly what it consists of, what you get when you purchase into it. And you'll notice down at the bottom I have 2 different program options. There's an all-inclusive plan, which I highly recommend for most folks, especially if you have any kind of diseases or any medications. And this actually provides a solid 30-minute consult with me where we can go over any of your recent lab work and really individualize and customize this program to you. Now, for others, there's plenty of people out there who love to just kind of do it themselves. They love to, we call these people self-hackers. And this is going to be a great option too if you're feeling comfortable with managing supplements and different issues you're dealing with on your own. There's all video content and lectures throughout the program that are going to guide you exactly on how to do all of this. So it's all in there. All right, either option's great. See what works for your budget. And I'd love for you to join the program. All right, I'm really excited to be sharing this with folks and helping people revolutionize their health in a whole new way. So I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Please check it out, and we'll talk soon.